Before Wall Street existed, before Rome had even dreamed of building an empire, before the concept of a global economy had a name at all, the world had not yet fully articulated a crucial truth. But there was one power that understood it. You cannot rule an empire by force alone. Real control lies in the quiet, invisible architecture of money. The Achaemenid Persians didn't just understand this truth, they built it from the ground up. They turned finance into a weapon more durable than any sword. Welcome to Money Chronicles. This is where money, power, and history collide, and nothing is ever as simple as it looks. When most people think of ancient Persia, they imagine massive armies, magnificent palaces, and an astonishing empire stretching from the Aegean Sea to the borders of India. But beneath that spectacle was the real machine at work. A financial system so advanced that modern states still operate on the same blueprint. Taxes, standardized currency, administrative regions, state treasuries. Today we see these as natural features of the modern world. But they were not invented by the Greeks, the Romans, or the Chinese. The first fully integrated imperial financial system in history belonged to the Persians, and it all began with an almost impossible question. How do you hold together dozens of different cultures, languages, economies, and political traditions within a single system, without losing control the moment you turn your back? To understand this, we need to go back to the 6th century BCE, to Cyrus the Great. Cyrus defeated the Medes, conquered Lydia, captured Babylon, and assembled the largest empire humanity had ever seen. Nearly 40% of the world's population lived under his rule. There was no precedent for such scale. And that size brought with it a familiar problem: chaos. Each region had its own units of measurement, its own currency, its own tax system, its own traditions. Babylon collected taxes in grain, Lydia used coinage, Egypt relied on agricultural payments. Some regions paid in gold, others in livestock or manufactured goods. At a local level, these systems worked, but at an imperial scale, it was a nightmare. Cyrus was a brilliant conqueror and a surprisingly tolerant ruler, but he was not a financial engineer. The system functioned, barely. And just like corporations, empires collapse when their accounting can't keep up with their growth. That collapse nearly happened. After Cyrus, the cracks became visible. Regional governors sank into corruption. Taxes evaporated before reaching the capital. Border provinces invented their own rules. The empire lacked a reliable system to coordinate resources across thousands of kilometers. Military strength alone was not enough. Structure was needed. Order was needed. Predictability was needed. And then he appeared, Darius the First. Darius didn't want to reinvent the empire. He wanted to stabilize it. And to do that, he introduced something the Persians had never fully attempted before: a systematic, measurable, unified approach to money and governance. In other words, imperial finance. His first move was radical. He divided the empire into administrative districts called satrapies. The idea itself wasn't new, but Darius standardized everything. Each satrapy had a fixed, predetermined tax obligation. No arbitrariness. The send whatever you can era was over. Taxes were now recorded, calculated, and predictable. If you complain about taxes today, remember this. By the 5th century BCE, the Persians had already invented large-scale bureaucratic taxation. But the real revolution was money. Darius realized something critical. You cannot govern such diverse cultures with dozens of currencies. Economies grow not through confusion, but through trust. So he created one of the most influential currencies in history, the gold daric. The daric was not just a coin, it was a promise, a reliable unit of value backed by imperial power. It was nearly 96% pure gold and had a standardized weight. Alongside it circulated the silver siglos. Now merchants from Egypt to Anatolia, from Mesopotamia to the Indus Valley, could trade using the same currency. Soldiers were paid in a universally accepted unit. Taxes were collected in a single measure. And this had a name: liquidity. The derrick was so trusted that even the Greeks, who fought Persia, used it in trade. In a sense, it was the world's first reserve currency. When your enemies use your money, you're doing something right. But money is useless if it stays still. It has to move. That's why Darius built the legendary Royal Road. Stretching roughly 2,700 kilometers, with stations every 20 to 30 kilometers, couriers could travel from Susa to Sardis in just 1 week. That speed would not be matched again until the invention of railroads. Taxes, messages, orders, gold, everything flowed along this road. It wasn't a convenience, it was a demonstration of power. Infrastructure equals authority. Meanwhile, the treasuries of Persepolis were filling. But this gold wasn't for decoration. It was strategic. For wars, for rebellions, for famines, to buy time. The Persians understood one thing very clearly. A strong treasury is a geopolitical weapon. And within this system was something even more subtle: incentive structures. Loyal satraps were rewarded. Corruption was punished. Local elites received loans. Temple economies were integrated into state finance. Differences weren't crushed, they were harmonized. A multicultural empire held together not by swords, but by ledgers. The system worked so well that later empires copied it outright. The Greeks mocked Persian luxury, but adopted their financial logic. The Romans conquered Persian lands, but borrowed their taxation and treasury models. Because the Persians had discovered a fundamental truth. The real infrastructure of empire is money. And this is where the story reaches the present. Satrapies today are called states, provinces, or regions. The derrick today is called the dollar or the euro. The Royal Road today is fiber optic cables, trade routes, and data networks. Treasuries are now called reserves, sovereign wealth funds, or emergency liquidity. Names change, logic does not, and history keeps telling us the same thing. Empires don't collapse because they lose wars. They collapse because they lose control of their accounting. Rome debased its currency. Spain drowned in silver. The Ottoman Empire dissolved into tax farming. Britain could not bear the financial cost of 2 world wars. First, the balance sheet collapses. Then the flag comes down. The Persians understood this 2,500 years ago. The final lesson was simple. Prepare before crisis arrives. Keep the system simple, measurable, and honest. Because financial clarity is a form of power. History does not repeat itself. But if you fail to understand it, you will still pay the price.